One of the most counterproductive and honestly corrosive elements of political discourse is false equivalence. I talk about politics a lot, and I go after conservatives and Republicans a lot, and sometimes I get comments from people who apparently think they're making a point when they say, "Oh, sure, Steve, you say all this stuff about the Republicans, but I bet you wouldn't say it about the Democrats, would you?" Well, no, I wouldn't say the same things I say about the Republicans, about the Democrats. If I could truthfully do that, I wouldn't be a Democrat. But I am. Both parties are the same is an easily debunked claim made by people who only get away with it because the people they're saying it to are too lazy to be skeptical of it. Both major American political parties have their problems, to be sure, big problems, but one of them, the Democratic Party, is clearly preferable to the other. They're not the same, and anyone who says they are the same is either a clueless person trying to sound smart or a smart person trying to mislead you because they assume you're the clueless one. But sometimes the folks who make these comments get a little more clever about it. They take it one step further. They don't speak in terms of political parties, but in terms of ideologies. They say, "Oh, sure, Steve, you're always attacking the far right, but I notice you never attack the far left." Correct. Again, there's the unspoken assumption on the part of people who say things like this that they're saying something particularly insightful and cutting, like they've just nailed my feet to the floor on some critical point. How? They seem to be asking, can I regard those on the far right of the political spectrum as enemies, but not those on the far left? Aren't both groups extremists? Doesn't that make them the same? Or at least equally bad? I mean, no. Well, yes, I suppose by definition they are both extremists if in our visualization of the range of political thought we place them on opposite ends of that range. But are they the same or equally bad? No, I don't think they are. And my argument is not that leftists are all good and pure people and leftist ideologies are all infallible and would inevitably lead to a better society. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I believe. Leftists are not immune from ignorance or bigotry or ambition or corruption or any of the other things that lie at the root of inequality, injustice, bad government, and all the other social and political ills that afflict our society. The USSR was leftist in character, at least to a degree. I was not a fan. Authoritarianism is possible under leftist modes of thought. It's just a lot more difficult to justify. And that is one of the fundamental differences between the left and the right, and the big reason why I only have a problem with one of them. Authoritarianism is a problem, no matter which side of the political spectrum it originates from. Authoritarian socialism is a thing, but nowadays those who hold to it aren't really shown much respect. They're dismissed and derided as tankies and shoved off into their own little corner of the movement. That's not how it is on the other end of the spectrum. I'm not saying every right-winger is an authoritarian, or at least a professed one, but most of them seem completely fine letting the authoritarians run the show. It's the opposite of how things are arranged on the left. On the right, it's the anti-authoritarians who are relegated to their own little corner where no one pays attention to them, which in this case I understand, since the most avowed anti-authoritarians on the right are libertarians who don't deserve to be taken seriously because they're a deeply unserious group of people who regard not being able to buy as many guns as they want for any reason as an intolerable tyranny. Fuck libertarians. They're the loser nerds of the right. They ought to be shoved into lockers and left there. It's the authoritarians who dominate right-wing discourse. And right-wing politics has had a decidedly authoritarian bent since long before I was born. What can be confusing is that right-wingers often don't speak in frankly authoritarian terms. Quite the opposite. They claim to be agents of liberty. They vow to destroy the overbearing and intrusive government that is invading all of our lives. But in practice, They want to drive queer people from public life. They want to empower police to enforce the law brutally and aggressively, so long as it's not against them. And they want to weaken government authority so that it can be replaced by private authorities, which would be accountable to no one. And those are mostly Republican policies. I said we're speaking now in terms of ideologies rather than parties. The ideologies on the far right are among the most terrifying and dangerous schools of political thought ever conceived. Christian dominionism, white nationalism, Nazism. Authoritarianism is possible from the far left. It is virtually inevitable from the far right. And when it comes, it brings with it oppression, exploitation, and genocide. Why am I okay with the far left, but not the far right? It's pretty simple, really. If I imagine what the world would be like if people on the far left were able to make it work the way they think it should work, with the exception of the authoritarian leftists who, like I said, are off in their own little corner, that world looks pretty good. My disagreements with folks on the far left are mostly over practical matters. I'm not an anarchist, but that's not because I think anarchists are bad people or anarchism itself is a necessarily harmful set of ideologies. I just think it's unrealistic, and I don't see how we could possibly get there from here. But if we could skip past the how do we do it bit, which I've noticed a lot of anarchists do anyway, it looks like a better world. If all practical concerns were addressed and the world worked how most people on the far left want it to work, that's a better world. That's a world where unnecessary burdens are lifted, where the remaining necessary burdens are shared fairly among all people, where people are free and equal regardless of their race, religion, ethnicity, nationality, sexuality, gender identity, health, disability, whatever. It's a world I could probably stand to live in. If I imagine what the world would be like if people on the far right got to arrange it their way, it's pretty much a nightmare no matter how you look at it. You're going to wind up living in an authoritarian dystopia no matter what. The only difference is where the authority comes from. If the Nazis and those of similar worldviews get their way, it'll be the authority of a despotic and unaccountable government. If the libertarians get their way, it'll be the authority of ultra-wealthy capitalists, loosed from even the meager regulations that restrain them today, free to do whatever they want to whomever they want. And let me emphasize, I'm not saying those things will be unintended consequences of far-right ideologies. That's how things would work by design. That's the world they want. A world where racial and sexual minorities are either persecuted into invisibility or just straight up mass murdered out of existence, where there will always be a lower class and they will always be exploited by the upper class with no protections of their rights, where public education and public transportation and independent media do not exist, where healthcare is even more of a commodity than it is now, where there is no minimum wage, no workplace safety standards, no freedom of speech, no religious freedom, no legitimate elections, hell, probably no elections, period. It's not a world I would want to live in, even if I were rich enough to escape its horrors, because I'm not a fucking monster. That's not a flex. I mean, it's a little bit of a flex. Anyway, like I said, it's pretty simple. Though I am sometimes frustrated with people on the left because I find them to be impractical, I consider them friends and allies because at the end of the day, they are trying to make the world better for everyone, while people on the right are trying to make the world unimaginably shittier for almost everyone. They're not the same. The choice between the two is obvious, and pretending it's not doesn't make you astute or incisive or a bold iconoclast. It makes you a fucking doofus.